So how does a scientific field actually get better? How did the tools we use to understand the world really evolve? Well, today we're going to find out. We're diving deep into the science of management research by looking at the first 10 years of one very special journal, Organizational Research Methods. It's like we get a front row seat to watch scientific innovation as it happens.
Let's start with a big question. Why does bad research happen, right? We all hear about these studies that just can't be replicated or conclusions that seem to totally miss the point. And it's easy to think it must be about bad intentions or maybe just sloppy work. But what if the real story is something else entirely?
Well, the thing is, a lot of the time it's not bad research at all. It's research that's simply limited by old tools. See, entire scientific fields can get kind of stuck in a rut. Researchers get trained on a specific set of methods, and they just keep using them over and over. Not because they're trying to do bad science, but because it's what they know. It's efficient, and hey, it's what gets them published. And this creates this massive inertia that can really slow down progress.
And listen, this isn't some new idea. Way back in 1987, a major review of the field pointed this out directly. This quote just nails it. The key word here is intransigence. That's a fancy way of saying a stubborn refusal to change. It's that old saying, right? When all you have a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. And that's exactly what happens. The field stops asking bigger, more interesting questions simply because they don't have the right tools in their toolkit to even try and answer them.
So, okay, let's set the stage here. What did this science stuck in time actually look like on the ground? Before our story really kicks off, what was the standard playbook for a researcher in management science?
Well, the typical study before 1998 looked something like this. You'd have a cross-sectional survey, meaning you're just taking a snapshot in time. A lot of the time, it was a lab study with students, and the focus was almost always on the individual. For the analysis, you'd pull out the old standbys, like multiple regression. Now look, there's nothing inherently wrong with these methods, but when that's all you're doing, you end up with this really narrow view of the world. You completely miss how things change over time or how a team's dynamic can affect a whole company. So, faced with this kind of gridlock, the field decided to try something, an experiment, really. In 1998, they launched a totally new kind of journal. Its goal wasn't to publish findings about management. No, its job was to build and share better tools for the researchers themselves. And that journal was Organizational Research Methods, or ORM for short. And let me tell you, its mission was seriously ambitious. This wasn't just some niche publication for the hardcore stats geeks. The whole idea was for it to be a bridge, bringing the latest and greatest research tools to everyone in the field, to help them actually understand and use these new techniques so they could start asking those bigger, better questions we talked about.
And that brings us to the absolute heart of our investigation today. Did the experiment work? I mean, really, did creating this special place for innovation actually help break that cycle? Did ORM really push the science forward in its first decade? Well, let's dig in and find out.
Okay, here's the game plan. We've talked about the problem and the experiment. Next up, we're going to peek inside the researcher's toolkit. Then we'll see if things were actually moving faster than the rest of the field. And finally, we'll tackle the biggest question of all. Were they even building the right tools for the job?
All right, time to get into the data. And the source for this explainer is a beast. It's a massive content analysis of all 193 articles published in RM's first decade. We're talking 1998 to 2007. They coded every single topic, which gives us this incredible window right into the minds of the field's top tool builders.
And boom, the very first finding is a showstopper. It reveals the absolute dominance of quantitative methods, the world of numbers and stats. A whopping 90% of all the topics discussed fell into this category. That leaves just 10% for qualitative methods. And believe me, this imbalance is a super important theme, and we are definitely going to come back to it.
So let's drill down into that huge 90% chunk. First, let's talk about research design. No surprise, surveys were still king. But what's interesting is that we also see a lot of talk about temporal issues, which is all about studying things as they unfold over time, and also web-based research. This tells us they were really trying to move beyond those simple one-off snapshots.
Okay, next up, measurement. And here, the focus was all about getting the fundamentals right. You see terms like validity and reliability pop up a ton. So what's that? Well, validity is basically asking, are we actually measuring the thing we think we're measuring? And reliability is asking, if we measure again, will we get the same result?
Putting these two together shows they were obsessed with making sure the data was solid, accurate, and dependable. And then we have analysis. The old workhorse, multiple regression, was still hanging in there. But check this out. Right on its heels were much more sophisticated techniques. Things like structural equation modeling and, importantly, multilevel research. And this multilevel stuff is a huge deal. It's the tool that finally lets you study, say, individual employees within their teams and those teams within their larger organizations. It's a game changer.
And these weren't just static topics. There were real, clear trends happening. Just take a look at multi-level research. This chart shows you just how much attention it got over the course of the decade. It's a huge spike. This is what innovation actually looks like in the data. It's direct evidence that the methodologists were actively building and pushing these more powerful tools.
Okay, so it's pretty clear there was a lot of movement happening inside ORM. But so what? Did any of it actually matter to the rest of the field? I mean, was this just a cool little club talking to itself, or was it genuinely speeding up the pace of change for everyone?
Well, check this out. The source paper found a pretty stark contrast. For the method users, the researchers out in the field publishing in mainstream journals, it can take 2 to 3 decades for a new method to really catch on. But inside ORM, with the method developers, we're seeing these big trends emerge in just 1 decade. The innovation cycle is just running so much faster.
And this proves it wasn't just a club talking to itself. You can see it in the citations. Top-tier journals like the Journal of Applied Psychology were citing ORM papers heavily. And what does that mean? It means the tools being built in ORM were actually being picked up and used to do real, on-the-ground research. It was working. It was being the catalyst it was designed to be.
Okay, so ORM is building new tools. It's getting them out to researchers way faster than before. Awesome. Case closed, right? Well, not so fast. This brings us to the last and honestly probably the most important part of this whole story. Were they building the right tools? To figure this out, the researchers did something really clever. They went out and found the 25 most influential theory articles in the field. And then they asked, what kinds of methods do these big ideas need to be tested properly? And the theories were super specific. This quote here is a perfect example. It's literally calling for studies that can look at both individuals and the organizations they're in at the same time. Which, hey, that's exactly what that multi-level modeling we talked about is for.
So you can almost make a scorecard. On one side, you have what the big theories are asking for. On the other side, you have what ORM was delivering. And when you do that, a really interesting picture emerges. For all the quantitative needs, the numbers and stats stuff, the match was fantastic. Theories asked for things like multi-level modeling, and bam, ORM was on it. But when it came to the qualitative side of things, the deep understanding you get from case studies, interviews, that kind of thing, there was a pretty big gap.
And this brings us right back to that number from the beginning. Think about this. Roughly half of the biggest, most important theories in the field were calling for qualitative research. But only 10% of the tools being built and discussed in ORM were qualitative. That's a huge disconnect. And that forces you to ask a really tough question. If our biggest, most groundbreaking ideas need that deep, contextual, qualitative approach to even be tested, is a toolkit that's 90% quantitative going to cut it? I mean, are we just leaving some of our best ideas sitting on the shelf, completely unexplored?
So, let's wrap this up. What are the big takeaways here? 1, focused effort really can speed up innovation. 2, there's always going to be a bit of a lag between the people making the tools and the people using them, but something like ORM can shrink that gap. And 3, and this is the big one, our most important theories need a diverse toolkit. They need both the numbers and the narratives. And that gap in qualitative methods, that's not a failure. It's a huge flashing sign pointing to a massive opportunity for the next wave of researchers.
And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. The story of ORM really shows that moving science forward isn't always about that one eureka moment. A lot of the time, it's about the slow, careful, and frankly, difficult work of just building better tools. Which kind of makes you wonder, right? In any field, when we realize we need better ways to answer our most important questions, whose job is it really to step up and build them?